It's the 1980s and a mother has become fearful of her husband's violent outbursts. She is seeking advice from professionals to obtain a divorce, after which she goes missing, and the horrific events that unfold are the inspiration for this famous scene in the movie Fargo. This is the case of Helle Crafts. Helle Nielsen was born in Denmark in 1947. She moved to America and met her husband Richard Crafts in 1969. They met as they were both training in the flight industry. Richard was a pilot and Helle was training to be a flight attendant. They marry and buy a house in Connecticut. A few years later, Richard is sadly diagnosed with colon cancer, but this is when Helle begins to see the first signs of Richard's controlling and angry behaviour. Richard is undergoing chemotherapy at the time and Helle is very attentive towards him. Rather than be appreciative, Richard gets annoyed and angry with her. He survives his battle with cancer and they go on to have 3 children. Their family are very financially stable. Richard makes a 6-figure salary and this is back in the 70s and 80s. However, Richard has fallen out of love with Helle and despite being wealthy, he refuses to divorce her because he does not want to pay any alimony or child support. So to try to get Helle to leave him, he says that his cancer has come back. This is a complete lie, but he thinks that the strain of caring for him along with 3 children will force Helle to leave. The children would remain with him and therefore he wouldn't have to pay any child support. However, Helle finds out that this is a lie and she doesn't leave. Helle at this point begins to see how manipulative Richard can be and the fact that he lied about having cancer. She doesn't want to leave at this point, mainly for the children's sake. But Richard, being deeply unhappy in the marriage, begins to have multiple affairs. Helle finds out about these affairs because she discovers receipts of presents that he had been buying other women. Also at the time he is absent a lot from home, not just because of the affairs he's having, but also because he volunteers as a police officer. I think it's like a part-time police officer. So not only is he a pilot and therefore he travels away a lot, Helle is a flight attendant, so she often is on trips away. He also is a part-time police officer, so they're not really spending a lot of time together. Helle gets fed up of the lies, the anger, the affairs, and therefore she hires a private investigator to get strong evidence of what Richard is doing. She wants to ensure that if she does divorce Richard, that she maintains custody of the children. Although Helle did want to build a strong case against Richard, she's also very fearful of him at this point. He is violent, he can be very angry at times, and incredibly controlling. She is fearful as to what he might do if she does decide to leave, especially if she gets custody of the children. This fear is so real and so in the forefront of her mind that she even warns family and friends that if she goes missing, you need to start looking immediately at Richard. It's like she knows how manipulative, how controlling and abusive Richard could be if he doesn't get his own way. So she is warning everyone that she knows that's close to her, look, if I go missing, I've not run away, I've not taken a trip, you need to look towards Richard. So November the 18th, 1986, Helle returns home from work. She's been on a flight attendant trip to Europe, I think it was, and this is the last time anybody sees her. The next morning, November the 19th, Richard wakes the nanny and his 3 children and tells them all to go to his sister's house. He states that you all need to leave because the power has gone out at the house. The nanny even questions him and says, well, where's Helle? And he says, oh, she's just staying, she's going to help me, she's in the house, don't worry, she's going to come over later. A few days later, Helle doesn't turn up for work, so her work colleagues ring home. They call Richard and say, like, where is she? Richard says, don't worry, she's gone on a trip to Denmark to visit her mum. The work colleagues are really confused. Why would Helle not tell us this? She's very good at turning up to work on time. It was very out of character for her to take a random trip and not tell anyone. Richard explains this away by saying, oh, she didn't tell you because she was in a rush because her mum is sick, so she quickly got on a flight and went over to Denmark. A few days later, and Helle's friends start asking questions too, to which Richard responds that Helle's on vacation, so the stories are starting to change. The friends, knowing what Helle had told them previously, are alarmed, so they contact the police. The police, however, don't investigate it at all. As far as they're concerned, Helle is a flight attendant. She's from Denmark. It's very plausible to them that she could have taken a flight to visit family. 2 weeks pass and no one has seen Helle. Richard hasn't reported her missing, and so her friends decide to hire a private investigator. The police are refusing to investigate it, so they're going to take matters into their own hands. When this PI begins investigating the case, they question the nanny first. This nanny informs the PI that on the day that Helle went missing, Richard was ripping up some carpet in the bedroom and replacing it. Also, they used to have a freezer in the basement, which is now no longer there. And around the time Helle disappeared, Richard also rented a powerful woodchipper. He also discovers that on November the 20th, so this is the evening after she goes missing, so she returns on the 18th, Richard moves the entire family out on the 19th, and on the evening of the 20th, around 3 a.m, a lorry driver sees someone on a bridge with a large woodchipper. This private investigator has accumulated a lot of evidence. He takes this to the police, who then do start investigating Helle's disappearance. They get Richard initially to take a lie detector test, which he passes. He manages to show no emotion, no nerves, anything within that entire interview. Police start investigating the case, and they see that there are receipts for not only a woodchipper rental that night, but also a chainsaw, and he brought a new deep freezer, which is now no longer in the house. This is the one that the nanny also confirmed that there was one in the basement and now it's not there. Police also call in a forensic expert, a man called Henry Lee. He goes to the Crafts home and he finds blood on the couple's mattress. He tests this blood and discovers that it is Helle's. He even confirms that this blood is circulatory rather than menstrual. Henry Lee can even tell that the angle that this blood hit the mattress, it was caused by a blunt force object, and that Helle was kneeling over the mattress at the time. They even took some towels and tested those. They discovered that these towels had been drenched in blood and were subsequently bleached. Despite these towels being bleached and really thoroughly cleaned, the forensics could still tell that these had been covered in blood beforehand and probably used to clean up a crime scene. The police go to that bridge where the lorry driver saw the wood chipper on, and they discover piles of wood chips, an envelope addressed to Helle. They find countless blonde hair, 2 human teeth, bone fragments and human tissue, and 1 painted fingernail. They dive into the river and find parts of a chainsaw. Now the serial number has been scratched off, but they managed to use a solution in order to sort of recoup that serial number. So using that serial number, they can trace it back to where it was sold from and discover that it's the same place that Richard Crafts brought a chainsaw as well. They examine the wood chipper that Richard Crafts rented and discover that it is covered in human tissue. The hair and the tissue match up to Helle. They even take that 1 polished fingernail and test the polish that's on it and discover that it's a match to some nail polish found at Helle Crafts' house. To prove even further that Richard Crafts had placed his wife Helle Crafts into that wood chipper, they get pieces of animal bone and put that through the wood chipper, and the marks it leaves on the bone is the same marks that it left on Helle Crafts' bone. The bone fragments that they find are from her skull, so it is very, very clear that she has passed away. This isn't like from an arm or anything like that. She's definitely dead. They conclude that she has been so horrifically mutilated that her body will never be found. They believe that he put her entire body through that wood chipper. Richard is arrested and charged with murder. He never admits to the crime or tells the police what happened that night, so the police piece together what they think happened. They believe that Helle returned from work on the 18th of November. She comes in, puts the kids to bed, then changes her clothes. She looks at her mail, which she then puts in her pocket. She goes to change the sheets on the bed, and whilst doing this, her and Richard get into a fight. Whilst she's leaning over changing these bed sheets, Richard strikes her in the back of the head with a police flashlight. So the flashlight he uses as a voluntary police officer, he murders his wife with. He wraps her up in bed covers and puts her in the freezer in the basement. He then goes back upstairs, tries to clean the bedroom and goes to sleep. In the morning he gets up early and just gets rid of the nanny and the kids. He sends them off to a different house. He then rents a woodchipper, and then in the early hours on the 20th of November he proceeds to dispose of Helle Crafts' body. He buys a chainsaw and begins to cut her up piece by piece. He then puts these pieces in the chipper along with some wood. The reason also why there wasn't much blood splatter on the chipper is because her body was frozen. They believe he also mixed it in with some wood so it wouldn't look as suspicious. He then took apart the chainsaw and threw that in the river as well. He is found guilty and receives a 50-year sentence. He maintains his innocence to this day. He showed absolutely no emotion through the trial and no remorse. Richard was actually released in 2020 on good behaviour. He was sent to a sort of halfway house to reintegrate ex-convicts into society. At that time he was 82 years old. He horrifically mutilated his wife just because he didn't want to pay child support or alimony, despite the fact that he was incredibly wealthy. I think in this case Richard certainly shows signs of sociopathic behaviour. He has little to no emotion. He only cares about his own greed and wealth. He has absolutely no value on human life. Also the fact that he was released on good behaviour despite horrifically dismembering his own wife and desperately trying to cover up his tracks by placing his wife's body through a wood chipper. It's one of the worst cases I've heard of in terms of sort of disposing a body. That was the tragic case of Helle Crafts. If you like my content, please remember to like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you next time.